Welcome to CNN Newsroom. I'm Lynda Kinkade. US President Donald Trump about to embark on his longest and perhaps most ambitious foreign trip yet. He sets off for Japan from Hawaii in just a few hours for the first leg of a nearly two-week tour of 5 Asian nations. The driving force behind the trip, the threat posed by North Korea. During the brief stopover in Hawaii, Mr. Trump and First Lady Melania laid a wreath at the US-Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor. Well, right now, the US and its Asian allies are flexing their military might in the Pacific. CNN was granted exclusive access to rapid response drills of Japan. Our Ivan Watson was there.
Pounding through the Pacific Ocean, a U.S. Navy transport vessel approaching the flooded belly of a much larger warship.
We're watching now how one of these landing craft comes on board the dock landing ship. It's a remarkable piece of engineering, and it takes the coordination of dozens and dozens of sailors.
Some call this complicated procedure taming the dragon. We've been invited to see annual military exercises off the coast of Okinawa on board the USS Ashland. This is a ship that can transport dozens of vehicles and house hundreds of sailors and Marines. A small floating city where a visiting officer marks an important step in his military career. A ceremony at sea where Marine Lieutenant Jesse Schmidt receives a promotion to the rank of captain. The U.S. commands the world's largest Navy, but in 2 separate incidents last summer, Navy ships from the 7th Fleet collided with merchant vessels, killing 17 sailors. The Navy concluded these accidents could have been avoided. Commanders say they've served as a wake-up call.
Not being complacent and use all means available to evaluate your current situation.
Calling officer, steady on course 120, check-in 125.
In response, the Navy fired 8 senior officers and stepped up training and monitoring from the decks of these giant vessels. Every night, the chaplain leads the ship in prayer.
Keep watch over us this night. Guard our families from all harm.
At dawn, hundreds of Marines prepare for the day's big event, a simulated assault on a beach in Okinawa. Amphibious assault vehicles splash off the back of the Ashland and line up for the invasion. This operation, on land, sea, and air, requires the coordination of thousands of sailors, Marines, and soldiers.
These exercises help prepare the armed forces for the possibility of conflict, but they're also about sending a message of deterrence to U.S. enemies like North Korea, which continue to engage in a war of words with Washington.
Senior commanders say these annual war games also send a message to U.S. allies.
There's well over 22 countries in the Pacific that are friends and allies, training, working together, and that network, quite frankly, provides stability and security throughout the entire Pacific.
The U.S. has been the preeminent military force in the Pacific since World War II. In the era of Make America Great Again, some wonder whether the U.S. can or wants to continue playing this role here. Ivan Watson, CNN, Okinawa, Japan.
Well, we are covering Mr. Trump's trip from every angle. Our Ryan Nobles is in Honolulu, Hawaii, and Alexandra Phil joins us from Tokyo. I want to go first to Ryan. This is a busy schedule coming up, a 12-day tour, and by presidential standards, this is considered a very long trip.
Certainly is, Linda, not just by Donald Trump's administration, but by past presidential administrations. This is going to be the longest trip by a U.S. president to the Asia-Pacific region since the George H.W. Bush administration. And it certainly comes at a time when there is a lot of important things happening in that part of the world. Obviously, the tensions with North Korea are high on the list of priorities for the Trump administration, but there's also a lot of economic work to be done here with many of these different partners. Don't forget forget that the U.S. decided to pull out of an Asian free trade agreement shortly after Donald Trump took office. So the president is essentially going to have to talk to each one of these leaders individually about opening up trade deals between the United States and these different Asian countries. So there's a lot at stake here. This is a lengthy trip, but there's a reason for that. There's a lot for the president to work on during his time in this part of the world.
And Ryan, we of course know that the president is a creature of habit. He rarely stays anywhere else in the US apart from his own bed. How will he go living out of a suitcase for almost 2 weeks?
Well, that's a good question. You know, Lynda, his aides and the president himself has said many times that he was looking forward to this trip, that he was excited about the opportunity and the potential for the work that could be done here. But you're right, this is a lengthy trip. It's going to be long, packed days. Obviously, the hours are going to be different than what he's accustomed to living in Washington and on the East Coast of the United States. So those are all things he's going to have to contend with. You know, the other thing we should point out, Lynda, is that generally when the president travels, he stays at his own properties that are owned by him and his company. You know, there is a Trump-branded property here in Honolulu. He is not staying here tonight at that particular property. So there will be a bit of, you know, a discomfort for the president when it comes to that. But he and his aides say that he's prepared for it, and it won't affect him all that much.
All right, Ryan, just stand by for us. I want to go to Alex Field now. Alex, what's the likelihood North Korea will do something provocative during President Trump's trip?
It's tough to assign likelihood to North Korea's actions. I won't gamble on what North Korea would do or when they would do it, but certainly there is reason why many might suspect that they could pull off a provocative action. You've just got to look at the recent past. We know that North Korea uses major international events for their provocative actions in order to garner maximum attention. They also sometimes coincide these provocative measures with national holidays, for example. What we are hearing from the South Korean spy agency is that they have picked up on signs of some activity at a missile research facility, and they also believe that one of the underground tunnels at the country's main nuclear test site is ready for its next test. Now, put this into context. The fact that North Korea could be ready for another ballistic missile launch or another nuclear test doesn't at all indicate that they would move to do this in the immediate or imminent future. Of course, these are decisions that are ultimately made by their leader, Kim Jong-un. But the fact that they are prepared does, of course, send a signal. North Korea knows very well that it is constantly being observed, that satellite images and data are being collected, that data is being closely scrutinized, and certain movements are certainly ways for North Korea to send a message to, say, the United States and others in the region about what they perceive to be their power or their readiness to pull off these kinds of measures. Look, this is a regime that has conducted some 22 ballistic missile launches since just the start of the year. It was also just about a month or two ago that they conducted their 6th nuclear test, the most powerful test yet. We've got to sit back, wait and see what they could do with President Trump in the region. But again, if they made any kind of move, it would be considered wildly provocative at this point, Lynda.
Absolutely. And Alex, we know, of course, that President Trump will be meeting with U.S. troops both there in Japan but also in South Korea. What message is he hoping to send?
You've got some 30,000 U.S. troops who are stationed in South Korea on a permanent basis, another 50,000 here in Japan. Of course, they are the sort of front line of defense, of deterrence to the regime. They are the very clear symbol and the fact of American strength in the region. You've got this U.S. Commitment to defending and protecting allies. That is a treaty obligation. Certainly, the allies want to hear that that commitment remains strong from the Trump administration, especially as the threat to the United States mounts. We have seen this incredible acceleration with the North Korean missile and nuclear program, the threat becoming increasingly real when it comes to the regime working to achieve their stated goal of developing an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of delivering a nuclear-tipped warhead all the way to the United States. That sparks concern for the allies in the region because they want to know that even with the mounting risk to the U.S., the U.S. remains ironclad in its commitment to their protection right here. To that end, you don't just have the troops here, you also have had a recent buildup of military infrastructure in the region in the days and weeks leading up to this very important visit. Lynda, also another sign to North Korea.
Absolutely. Certainly a lot to cover over the next 12 days there. Alexandra Field for us in Tokyo and Ryan Nobles in Honolulu. Thank you both.